G'day viewers, my name is Michael and welcome back to SingleRacer. And now, as you might be able to see here, I'm in the cockpit of the magnificent Lamborghini Countach, and that's because this is a totally unplanned video due to a totally unplanned set of circumstances. And so, if you can bear with me, I want to take you on a trip down my childhood memory lane, and I'm hoping you'll come along for the ride. But now, of course, as always, if you don't want to hear this 2 to 3 minute story, just by all means skip to the actual video by clicking on the time in the description. But I'd just like to explain to you how this all came about. And so it simply came about because of Mike Smith over at SingleRacer 604. Now, if any single person is listening to this and doesn't know about the channel SingleRacer 604, I strongly urge you to go over and subscribe straight away, because he is one of the best sim racing channels on YouTube. No joke, this channel is fantastic. And so therefore what happened was, because I'm a subscriber myself, was this is, when you're listening to this now, this was recorded in December 2019, and he was doing a 12 Cars of Christmas series every day for the 12 days, kind of like an advent calendar, was talking about a particular mod car for a particular sim racing game, and in a lot of cases giving the car that he was talking about away as a free prize. And so for each video produced, all you had to do to enter to win that car on this particular day of the said video was answer a question that he put in the video. And in this case it was, what was your first racing sim that you remember ever playing? And so I answered back in the comments that my first ever racing sim that I remember was Stunts, but I didn't remember that it had opposition or opponents, and so I nominated that it was the very first Need for Speed game called Road and Track Presents Need for Speed. But it was Stunts that I remember so fondly playing as arguably my first ever sim racing game, at least that I remember. And so herein lies the prompt for this video, because he answered back that he knew Need for Speed. I mean, Need for Speed, the original, is a fantastic game and has a great reputation, but he hadn't heard of Stunts. And so he thought, oh, I'll have to check it out. And my immediate reaction is, well, I know I own it. I wonder if I could find it again, because unfortunately I'm so old that it's on floppy disks. I mean, I'm sure most of you don't even know what floppy disks are, but here's a picture just to remind you, for those old enough to remember. And so I knew I had it, but there was no way of getting it off the floppy disk, so I thought, I wonder if I could find it on the internet. And sure enough, I did. And so, given that it's 30 years old, if you want to, then come along for the ride with me to go back in history and check out one of the very first, arguably, sim racing games. And let's go do a time warp now back to this original game. And so, even though I don't own the DeLorean from the Back to the Future movies with its flux capacitor, let me use the power of my editor to switch on the time machine and go back to this brilliant Lamborghini Countach in 1990. So let's go hot lapping. Okay folks, and as we come off the stage onto the track, ready to go in our amazing Lamborghini Countach. Look at that graphics, I mean, isn't that spectacular? Now please keep in mind this is a 30-year-old game, but I would argue too that I think the more graphics cards develop and improve, the worse it makes a game look. I think if you've got a computer and the associated graphics card of the time, and ran this on that, it wouldn't look nearly as bad. It's just the way it's blown up, of course, in today's really high-res graphics. So, but it is a fantastic looking game. But just for the sake of people like my brother who still fondly remember the game, I'd like to go one step back and just show you the whole menu and talk about what made this game so great. Now let's do that now. Okay folks, so here we are on the desktop, and the first thing that I noticed when you download this game is that it runs in its own DOS box, meaning that you can run it on Windows 10 64-bit totally fine. I was quite shocked at how easy it was to get this game to work. So all you do is click on the icon and it'll start up perfectly in full screen mode. It was really quite a shock, but what I'll do is I'll let the music play out for people like my brother who remember this game very fondly, and we'll chat again at the menu. Okay folks, so here we are at the menu, and there were 4 things, as I think I mentioned, that made this game really stand out. And the first was the sound. Now you've got to remember, this was not long after things like Pac-Man that just had those digital strange noises, you know, very basic noises, whereas this not only had great music, albeit very short tunes, but still had great music. But the sound of the car, I thought, was the most realistic for the time to what you know, an engine sound would sound like, as opposed to just a digital squeak and squawk that was always in the past. Now you had, if you did have opponents. I told Sim Racing 604 that opponents weren't in the game, or at least I didn't remember. But the thing that, or the second thing that really stood out in this game was the ability to hotlap. You know, I think I got addicted to hotlapping because of this game specifically, because if you think of the game being 30 years old, the car choice was quite extraordinary. So here we are in the Countach, and you had your typical high quality racing cars like Ferrari, Jaguar. You know, there were no licensing problems back in those days. But you even, if I can find it here, you even had a truck, and then your really high-end Porsche, but also, if I can find it here, an actual Indy race car. I couldn't get over it. So absolutely fantastic choice of cars given the age of the game. And the other thing that really made it stood out was because you had the typical thing that most games started to develop, which was your choice of tracks. And so here is the typical track, but the extra thing that lifted this game above, not that I can say there were many racing games before it, but its niche, if you like, was the fact that it was, given its name, a stunts type game, meaning that you had jumps and you had even loops that you could put in. And the thing that set it apart, or the third thing, was that you could edit all this. So you could choose, say in my case, if I can find it here, a very simple basic track, and I used to use this one for hot lapping, and you could just really hone your abilities in this track. So if we go back as an example and drive the track, now The password no longer is important because it'll just skip that, which is fantastic. I used to open the book and type in the password, and here we come off a bit like a rally game off the platform, ready to race. But the other thing that made this so good was the handling, in the sense that today's standard, actually, if I go back now, back to the menu, I just want to show you the controls here. So you had the options, you had 3 choices for controls, which was good. So you could still technically use, now I haven't tried it to be honest, but like an Xbox controller, to try it that way if you want to go back and have a bit of classic fun. But if we go back now and drive, what was amazing was, compared to today's standards of lag and that type of thing, you would call this quite sloppy, but the truth is, for its time, it was very, very accurate. Now, my brother and I used the expression for sim racing in the zone, meaning that when you did dozens and dozens of laps and you raced around the track, you got very familiar with where you should brake and all that kind of thing. And what I found was, this was so accurate in that once you got in the zone with this game, you could actually drive very, very, very consistently and break your time like by tenths of a second. That it was that accurate in the sense of a game for its time. And also just the sounds. Now again, these are digital sounds, but for its time, I thought this sounded absolutely fantastic. And if we fly around the track here, now I'm just using the keyboard, I'm just using the typical arrow keys of the keyboard. Here's the big jump, oh, and I go off. I'm just not used to the game. I just basically downloaded it and gave it a try and thought I had to do a video on it. But you can also, of course, save the replay. So if you have a high score and things like that, you can have the times, and it will not only save the times but have records of the times against other people, so you could race. Now, unfortunately, all my HOTLAP times are on the floppy disk, which I can't get to, unfortunately. I've got to figure out a way if there's an external drive you can buy to try and get some of these times, but just for my own enjoyment. But an absolutely fantastic game. So let's end it now with the I mentioned that it had the track editor, so you could edit your own tracks with your own jumps, your own loop-the-loops, everything like that, and just make it as enjoyable. Obviously won't try it now because it'll just take too long to do that, but just as an example, here's one of the major tracks that you could try and develop, but to suit your own particular style. If you enjoyed that old school type race game and you want to bring back the memories like I did for myself and probably also for my brother. Now let's do the final thing as a way to say goodbye and load a particular replay to show off the track as best as possible, given that I'll probably crash if I try it myself. But so this is SingleRacer so this is Michael signing out for SingleRacer. Sorry, I'm all excited given that the joy of driving this game again, given all those childhood memories. But this is Michael signing out for SingleRacer. I'll catch you next time. See you later, and let's check out this replay.